Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Kriens,
And I'm Dan Siegel.
and we're here at 1440 in the beautiful sunshine of California here in a January day in winter.
It's beautiful here in the Redwoods.
And in the redwood forest. And I'm here with Dan Siegel, who is world-renowned interpersonal neurobiologist who's made an amazing career writing and teaching all of us about the mind and the difference between the mind and the brain and the mind sight that we can develop in these brainstorms that we have, to borrow some book names that Dan has written. And so first of all, welcome, my dear friend.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here with you.
Good to have you back again.
Absolutely. I'm going to be here 5 times the next 4 months.
And I love that. And every time with different ways to teach us. So
yeah.
And I want to talk about your new book, but I also want to talk a little bit about the education conference, and really by expanding on that a little bit, some of the things that you're seeing in education, and as we try and learn and be taught about the mind, and particularly as it relates to bringing that into the education system, which I know you've been here with the conference talking about this weekend. So
yeah,
can you bring some of our gang here up to date on your thinking and the weekend you've just had?
Well, absolutely. I mean, 1440 hosted this amazing conference with educators from all over the world, where the topic was about really looking at the mind, emotions, the body, and the educational experience kids have, really focusing on K through 12. And really, actually, there were people even about preschool. And we had some absolutely wonderful discussions with the educators that were here.
Yep.
Many of them really interested in learning the cutting edge science. So we had fabulous people like Mark Brackett and Nadine Burke-Harris. I was even given an opportunity to talk to, and there was this great convening of minds, really, because the conference had an opportunity to just have presentations and experiential exercises and time for people to walk around the Redwoods and experience, what they were learning with each other in discussions as they were wandering the trails and just being with each other at meals. So it was a beautiful, beautiful gathering.
And so much of what we believe at 1440, and I know you've spent years and so much energy on, is in this model of education, we can't just cram STEM into kids' heads.
Right.
Nothing against science and technology and so forth, but shoving all of that into their brains and not affecting their minds and their ability to receive it and comprehend it and then relate to it and use it is, I'll say, maybe this is oversimplifying it, is a waste of time. And so can you talk about this, about how to make this work that needs to happen in those areas enhanced a little bit by your findings and how the mind works and how we relate to that in the education system in a way that actually allows kids to not just be taught, but to learn. I'll say it that way.
Yeah. Well, if we take STEM and think about the inspiration of 1440 and the stream that's going by, you could say that one thing we absolutely need to do is make STEM, that's the focus now, into stream. And so S is science, T is technology, E is engineering, and M is math. So that's what people talk about. But let's emphasize STEM. But if you add R and A, you get, for the A, you get the arts.
Yep.
And R, you get reflection. And you also get relationships and you get resilience. So if you build those 3 R's into the R, and then you could say, let's have a stream of education, we'll be all right. So what the conference is really focusing on, all the presenters really, was how we need to focus on the subjective experience of what people go through. So Mark Brackett's beautiful presentation, and Mark is the head of the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale, and he was talking about his ruler approach, which was the importance of recognizing emotions. That's the R, understanding them, labeling them, so UL, expressing them, and regulating them. That's the ruler, that's Mark's program. And then Judy Willis, a person who used to be a neurologist who became a teacher, who now teaches about the importance of teachers knowing about the brain. So it is important to know about the brain processes. And then Nadine Burke Harris, she did this exquisite talk about the importance of understanding adverse childhood experiences and how they negatively impact the development of the whole child all the way into adulthood. So the importance of prevention and understanding that relationships need to be really honored. So all the presenters, went through a deep analysis, as did I in my presentation, which was about something called the Yes Brain, this new book I have, which is really saying, how do we know how a relationship promotes a positive state of resilience versus a no brain, which is getting reactive and wanting to fight back or flee or freeze or faint, those ways that you shut down learning.
Yeah, and I want to use this to talk about your new book, because the thing that I think is so exciting about the field and the neuroscience of it is this idea that wouldn't arts and relationship and reflection be great things to add. That's not just because it'd be a nice thing to say that the kids also did in their school day. It's because it makes a difference in how the brain functions in its ability to do everything that it does. And this is not difference by theory or speculation. And I'd love for you to be able to talk about that and talk about the yes brain and the science of what's actually chemically, biologically going on in this thing on our shoulders. That's real and why it matters so much.
Well, Scott, that's a really good point. So if you consider it this way, let's start with STEM. And, I love science. I'm a science geek. I love science like crazy. I'm trained as a scientist. So
we're not replacing it.
No. So science, technology, engineering, math, those are great. I mean, I love those things. So this is to say that a whole child approach to learning means that if you think about relationships and reflection and resilience, and even put the arts in there, just to add the R and the A there to STEM into stream, what you get basically, if you think about it this way, is with the 4 S's, of science, technology, engineering, math, you have people, kids, students, and adolescents, they are put in a situation where you say, here's a set of knowledge you should learn. We're going to test you, and there's a right and a wrong. Now, that's one aspect of learning and one aspect of living. But life is filled with all sorts of uncertainties. And life is filled with just being present for what happens with your emotions, for example, or your relationships, where there isn't a right and wrong. There's just authenticity, openness, and connection. And if we don't give children the opportunity, or teens in school, to actually rest in that presence, that openness of awareness, where you have time to, let's say, reflect on what's going on, and there's no right or wrong answer. Time to be in a relationship face to face, having communication, and it's just about really understanding the other, not judging the other. Or take, for example, the experience of art, where you say, here's a piece of paper, just try drawing what you see. And it's not about right and wrong. You don't have to be Picasso. You can just let the inside out. So reflection, relationships, even the experience of resilience is about embracing uncertainty, whereas the other things are really about, there is a right and wrong way to do science and math for the most part. You can be creative with it later on. And so we want to have people have the balance of these things.
It's so key, because, having built companies and been part of teams that have grown to thousands of people, you interview a lot of people. And it doesn't take long in an interview, and this is, I'll call this, with maybe a new college grad's the easiest, but it could be years later, to tell whether you're interviewing a test taker or a really creative thinker. And one way, and tell me if this is the way to think, but for you, but certainly it's the way it lands on the other side of a desk interviewing somebody to come into Silicon Valley. A test taker has almost no value in an innovation company because there are no tests. Nobody's ever done what we're trying to do, So a way that what you're talking about lands for me is without that resilience and without the reflection and without the ability to get your whole mind about what's being shoved into your brain, you might be able to spit it back out and you might get an A+. But when you show up in the world as a successful test taker, you're not going to get far.
Exactly. And that person won't have the resilience or the creativity or the curiosity. In some sad ways, it's been beaten out of them. All they get is reinforcement for right and wrong answers, rather than like this, just to build on what you're saying. The other person who you see says, I'm really curious. I may not have all the answers, but I love asking the questions, right? But you can cultivate that in kids, and that's what the Yes Brain really is all about. And it's, to say it really briefly, it teaches.
Talk about the book. Well, this has just come out, right?
It just came out a few days ago, right? So, and it was fun to talk about it with the educators because it's all about a simple, I'm an acronym addict. And there's
you always have been.
There's a very cheesy acronym about BRIE, cheese, BRIE. So the simple way to remember the Yes Brain approach is basically the overall thing is, if you say no harshly and say yes calmly and smoothly, people can feel the difference in whether they're in a reactive, fight, flight, freeze, and faint state of threat, or you can shift them into a yes brain state of being open and ready to learn, ready to approach uncertainty and say, I'd like to learn more. This is really interesting. I don't need to know the answer. So that's the receptive yes brain state. So the BRIE basically is, we teach about in the book, Tina Bryson and I, about balance, which is how do you achieve this harmonious flow that goes between chaos and rigidity, and allow yourself to really appreciate being alive, no matter what the challenges are. Then the R is resilience, which means, hey, if I get thrown into chaos or rigidity, I have learned the tools to get back to balance. That's what we call resilience. And there are all sorts of brain correlates of everything I'm saying. So I'm just giving you kind of the take-home lessons. So resilience is literally teaching the skills to get back to balance. Then the I and the E are insight and empathy. So if you take up the person you're interviewing, for your big company, and you want someone who's a creative person who can be a collaborative team player, insight is required, because you got to know, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and that's okay. And here are the questions I have, and I don't need to have the answers to all the questions because I work as a team and I have empathy. I have these social emotional skills of mindsight, basically seeing the mind of myself and others. So what I do is I'm a fully present team member, where if you look at all the studies of collective intelligence, you realize when we work together as a team, when we differentiate our knowledge base and our skills, but then come together collaboratively, not in a threatening way, like, oh my God, you would contributed this, so it threatens me, but you actually come with a yes brain approach to collaboration. That's where the MWE comes in. And
I
you
was
say,
gonna ask you.
Well, you can say what was on your mind.
Well, no, I'm just saying that, you've talked so much about, there's a brain resident here, and energy in me, there is in you. And then there's another one in here.
Exactly.
And I'd love for you to just elaborate on that.
Well, that's the whole thing. Exactly like you said it, that sadly, we grow kids up to think that they're separate. And I'll give you a little analogy about it in a moment, but in this separateness, people get very isolated and they think, I've got to prove myself on the test, rather than realizing, instead of just being a me, I don't have to lose my me in just a we, because that's, you don't want to go all the way to that extreme. So I have this term, about this MWE, MWE. And if you really feel the empowerment of saying, my identity is a MWE. I have a body. I'm going to get good sleep. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to enjoy my body, feed my body. Those are all the aspects of me that are important. And every student should learn that. We all should live that way. But if I don't also develop the we, where let's say we were on the team and I said, here's the question I have. You go, oh, I think I have a response to that. And you've got the answer to the question I have. Instead of me being threatened if I'm a separate me, I go, well, we are a we. And then we create a solution to the problem together because our identity is a we, right? And I may have said this in our last Facebook Live, and I know we're going to do this regularly soon, so I don't want to keep on repeating it, but it's an analogy that I used here at the conference, which I used at a high school nearby, where there were these suicides, and the kids, as are jumping in front of the train from San Francisco to San Jose.
It's an everyday tragedy. Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And the suicide rate is higher and higher, higher than it's ever been. Yeah. So I went to the school and I said to them at the end, I said, we can understand every parent wants to try to guarantee something, but we lock onto things with numbers like grade point averages or the eliteness of a school your kid can get into, or some measure that you think will guarantee something, which actually research shows doesn't guarantee anything.
Right.
So it's a false attempt to have some kind of certainty. So I talked to the parents about that. But then when I was talking to the parents and the kids in the room, I said this, I said, we live in a society that makes us believe we're just the candle wax. And what we're told is,
talk about that.
Yeah, remember? I mean, be the brightest candle in the box, you know, and then instead of lighting everybody's candle up, you know, you want to blow out their wicks. So you're the only one shining. So think about if we realize that we're just as much the light. This is the thing. This is the message of we, that if you aren't lit up and I lean over and I support you and your flame is lit up, it doesn't take anything away from my wick. And then all we've done is made the world a brighter place. And here's what we can all do. We all share the light. No one owns it. We just light up the world. And what a win-win-win situation that is for everybody.
Well, it's funny you use that term, because I was just going to make this comment, is this win-lose mindset.
Mm-hmm. Which is the no brain state, by the way.
Born out of fear, right?
Yeah.
And fear, which shuts down the executive function and puts us in survival mode. Can you talk a bit about what's going on in the brain when that happens?
Absolutely.
I get afraid. I shut down. I need you to lose so I can be safe.
Exactly.
Talk a little about, just to help people with what's chemically happening in there.
Well, exactly. This whole book, Yes Brain, is about exactly this question. Yeah. And it says to a parent or a teacher or anybody, how do we, in our own lives and in children's lives, how do we actually cultivate the yes brain state, which is open, receptive, ready to connect and collaborate, right? And to feel joy in life, versus the no brain state, which is what you're describing. So here's what we think happens in the brain in the no brain state. And the reason these terms are there is because in these workshops, what I would just say no really harshly, pause, and then say yes really sweetly. And people would feel the difference.
Yeah.
In the no brain state, this is where the whole notion comes from, is your brain is always trying to get a sense of what Steve Porges calls neuroception. It's trying to have a perception with the brain. That's what he calls the term. Is it safe or not safe?
Yep.
So once it says things are not safe, then what it does is it activates a threat response. And there are 4 F's you can get into that involve the brainstem and the limbic areas, the lower areas of the brain, that basically say we're in survival mode now. We got to fight back. We got to flee. We got to tighten up our muscles and freeze before we figure out, are we going to flee or fight? Or we're so helpless we collapse in a faint. And those 4 F's shut down learning.
And there's no time to pay attention to anybody else.
No.
And there's no time to think. There's no time to look around, because you might die.
That's right. That's right.
It's exactly. Like it's, my sort of layperson's way of thinking about this is it's like we've got this survival programming that should have had a date code put on it for when we're, stood up and left the jungle.
Exactly.
And it didn't. And so now all these states that are far from life-threatening still get processed the same way in the brain, don't they?
Oh, exactly. And they get processed in a way that is so all-encompassing, partly because we're incredibly social creatures. So even if you look at areas of the brain that mediate, like if you hit your arm or something like that and got some pain, it's exactly the same part of the brain that mediates social rejection. So we can get threatened, and it feels like we're being physically attacked when we're being socially excluded, right? So if you have a model in your mind, the only way I'm going to guarantee my social inclusion is by being the one with the right answer, and we're on a team, and we're trying to solve a problem, and you, Scott, come up with the answer, and I, Dan, don't. Well, you've just hurt me.
My life's on the line.
That's right.
Yeah.
I could get fired. Yeah. Now, in some job situations, that's how it works. So, so it's not necessarily, an illusion. It could be actually an accurate perception. So at that moment, now your success has been my demise.
Failure. Yeah.
And that's kind of what the lose-lose situation is, because everyone suffers in that situation.
Yeah.
Right. And I have to do everything I can to pull you down.
Yeah. and I go with you when when we do that. One does that, we do that. It's I guess a lot of it speaks to, at least I'll say for 1440, one of the things that we're about here is that it's how do we develop the rest of ourselves. And there's plenty of energy, plenty of great work, centuries of investment of time and knowledge on intellect and physical education. But the rest of ourselves isn't just a nice to have.
Right.
It's the rest of the package that you need to show up and be fully human.
Absolutely. Well, and, to build on that, this is Martin Luther King Day. And, Martin Luther King would have loved, I think Martin Luther King Jr. would have loved to join us, because his dream of a world where people could walk hand in hand, brother and sister, every race, every religion, is a dream that I personally feel at 1440, you've created the space to allow the conversations that are needed to create a wiser, more compassionate world like that. And this day of all days is this beautiful day to honor Martin Luther King, but every day to really honor that dream he had of saying, what do we do to wake up the mind that, okay, we've evolved with all these ways of maybe having in-group, out-group distinctions, and we've evolved in certain ways that make us compete with each other. But actually, how do you use consciousness to rise above what the brain evolved to do automatically, but realize, well, okay, we have evolved that way, and you're saying it's out of date, and I agree with you totally. So now how do we use our updated neural machinery, which is where consciousness comes in, to do, reflective practices like you did this weekend, to give the opportunity to do reflective practices like I did with all the educators this weekend, to say, how do you drop beneath automatic pilot, awaken the mind to this clarity of pure awareness, which is accessible. We have this wheel of awareness practice we do, and we do this with kids in school. We do this with students in high school. And there is you can really understand there is a science behind the idea of awakening the mind to go beyond automatic pilot. And we need settings like you've created here at 1440. We need inner conditions like reflective practices. We need relationships where you support them in each other. And cultural evolution can really be mediated by what you've created here, by what everyone can participate in,
And by the guidance that you bring, my dear friend.
Well, together. And we can do it.
And we can do it. And it's, it's what 1440 is about. It's what your work is so precious, is when Martin Luther King talks about all those visions, the question that we all take responsibility for is, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that? That's relationships. We understand that because of the brain, because of the mind, because of the science and the great work that you've done. More of which is going to be taking place, because Dan is going to be teaching Cultivating Stress Resilience, which is in April on the 20th to the 22nd, along with several other visits here. But if you get the chance, please look up Dan's class. It'll be awesome, as everything you do is. And my friend, thank you as always for being here.
Thank you.
Being part of this dream, being part of making things better, one relationship, one resilient act at a time.
Beautiful. So, Scott.
Be well, dear friend.
You too.
Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Martin Luther King Day.